So I'm going to talk about web accessibility and Drupal. Just for your information, I'm not an accessibility expert. I'm just a JavaScript developer that has to do some accessibility work within the Drupal project, and not that much of it. So, if you know better or if I do something wrong, just let me know if you know what I'm talking about. So just for information, like who in the room is familiar with accessibility? Okay, so you know the problem space and maybe as well the specification and kind of the problem that accessibility is designed to solve. So which is good. The session will be in kind of two parts. So the main part is going to be going over the accessibility kind of spec, not in detail, just high level, kind of talking what is it about. And then we'll see how Drupal kind of answer the accessibility concerns. So accessibility. On the web, it's there's like three main parties that are involved in accessibility. You have the developer, who is going to build the website. You have the content, and you have the user at the end, who is going to access this content. And different roles are different kind of problems. So we need to kind of separate that out so we can, make everything accessible for everyone. But we'll go back to this after a while. So first, when we talk about accessibility, it's really about disabilities. And it's not really about specific people, it's for everyone. Because to some extent, we are not, it's not if you're going to have accessibility problem, it's when you're going to have accessibility problem. So it involves everyone. Like, I have really bad eyesight, so I need, website, in a bigger font, so I can actually read them. But I don't have a wheelchair, so so it's not really disabled people that need accessibility, just everyone. So you have four main categories. You have physical disabilities, people who can't really point the mouse properly because, I don't know, they're shaking or they don't really have a good handle on what they're doing. Cognitive disabilities, so people who need simple content to understand, but also, like, for example, when I had to apply for a visa to come to Australia a few years back, it really helped that the website was clear so that I could understand the English in there, because I wasn't that good an English speaker before. Then you have auditory disabilities. You're probably thinking about subtitles in videos, but there's a bit more to that actually. And you have visual disabilities. So those are the main disability categories, and you've probably heard a lot about visual, like screen readers and all those kind of stuff. It's a bit like wheelchair access in the physical space. We talk a lot about them, and that's what we see the most when we talk about the subject, but that's not all there is to it. So as I say, it's, everyone is concerned about that. Like, for example, that on the top, that's the default Twitter size, and that's the size I, browse with, because it's just too small for me. So, you have people like me and old people as well, who kind of need to be taken care of, but they're not strictly, disabled, per se. So we were talking about deaf people. So this is one of the first websites I had to work on when I started web development. And that's for a French association of deaf people. And you see there's three video areas on the page. So the top one is going to translate everything in the menus into sign language. So whenever you hover one of the link, you're going to have the translation played in the top frame. Then the main content of the page is going to be on the main video frame. And then at the end, just the caption, translated into sign language. But it goes, further than that. For example, on the association website, there are comments, and in the comments, you can actually record a video to post a comment. So, most people just don't write any text and just record a video of them talking into sign language. Because for people who were born, without hearing capabilities, it's actually hard to read text for them. So it's just easier for them to look at someone, talking with sign language. So it's just to say that even if you think you're familiar with disabilities, there's probably going to be some use cases that are going to trip you up. So that's why we have standards, because it's already been figured out, and we need to make sure we kind of respect all of them to cater for people that you didn't plan for, basically. So when we talk about standards, we talk about the values we see, and they have a working group which is called the Web Accessibility Initiative that do a lot of work to make sure that the web technologies are accessible. So here we're just going to look at the web page kind of things that have a bit more. They do a bit more, but that's just what we are interested in right now. So the first one is WCAG. Who knows about this one? Okay, most of you. That's great. So that's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's a document that gives you a list of things you should and shouldn't do for your website to be accessible. Then we have ATAG, so Authoring Tools Accessibility Guidelines. This one is targeted at CMSs and software that allows you to create content for the web to make sure that the tool is itself accessible and the content you create is accessible as well. Then you have the User Agent Accessibility Guidelines. This one is for web browsers, screen readers, and this kind of software. So we're not going to talk much about that today because it's not within the Drupal space. It's more like close to the user. And then we have ARIA, which is Accessible Rich Internet Application. So this one is kind of a special spec because it actually adds capabilities to HTML for assistive technologies. As far as I know, it's only used by screen readers, but probably not. So let me know if you know any other kind of software we use that to do things, because I'm curious. So it's great. We have standards, so we know what to do to make the website accessible. So we can have a checklist, for example, and say, okay, we do this, 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 and the website is accessible. Well, not quite, because having a checklist doesn't mean the website is actually accessible. You need to test and make sure that a human navigating the website can have access to everything. So just following the standards isn't enough. I mean, you need to do some real user testing. But I guess the session after mine is going to be more into how to do it. Like, when do you plan the testing and what to do for the testing and everything. So stick around if you want to know about that. So the WCAG 2.0 guiding principle, that's kind of... so the WCAG document is pretty high level. It tells you like what should be done, but it doesn't tell you how. You have to kind of interpret that within your website. And to interpret that, you have principles. So the first one is the content needs to be perceivable. So you need to be able to, read it, see it, hear it first. Then operable, you can do something with it. Understandable, make sure it's simple enough for people to understand what it means. and robust, because I mean, the software changes, screen reader changes, get smarter, and implement more of the different specification. So you need to make sure that your content is not going to break when software improve. And to do that, basically it's follow standards. Well, I mean, for this, there's kind of a list of topics for each of the principle. Do you want me to go through what each topic is going to kind of cover within the spec, or should we just move on? All right. It's in the spec anyway. You can read it. It's accessible online. Then we have area. So this one is really targeted at kind of Web 2.0 website. That's kind of an old term, but you know what I mean. It's rich application. So to make sure that even if you have a complex JavaScript thing going on your page, this is going to be still accessible to screen reader users and keyboard users and all those kind of people. So area is going to allow you to turn the page or part of the page into kind of an application and define role, state, and relationship with the different content. So for example, with area, you can, so let's say on your page you have like a very fancy tooltip thing. So whenever you focus on a link, you have like the preview of this link showing up on a pop-in in the page. With area, you can relate the pop-up and the link together to make sure that screen reader know what's going on. So they're not kind of tripped up by this thing that appear on the page or in their voice software. So they know what's going on, basically. And I mean, Google Map is using area. Yeah, I checked, I wasn't sure, but I'm not sure how screen reader user kind of navigate web maps, but why not? So if we go back to kind of the high level of this, on the developer side, whenever you develop the website, the tool you're using needs to be following the A tag standard. So it's for authoring tools. So that's, in our case, Drupal. The content you produce needs to follow the WCAG guidelines. Also the area ones if you have like fancy JavaScript on a page. And whatever browser or screen reader you're using has to follow the UAG specification. So is that clear for everyone, basically? Who already knew this? Okay, so it's not wasted time, that's good. So let's talk a bit more about Drupal. So who can guess which specifications are going to apply to Drupal as a CMS? Yeah. I mean, the government requires a website to be WCAG accessible at the AA level, so that's pretty obvious. There's also the A tag specification that Drupal follows. So we actually have kind of statements about accessibility, because in Drupal it's a first-class citizen. It's one of the core gates. So for example, whenever you write a new feature for Drupal core, it has to be accessible, from the beginning. So make sure that people can use it, everyone can use it properly. And that's actually important for Drupal 8, because there's been a lot of work into new features, like really fancy stuff that you can see on the page, like inline editing, a new fancy toolbar. And all of this has been tested a lot for accessibility. So we have different, blind contributor actually in Drupal core, and they made sure that everything we have, they can use. So we're using area as well for all those fancy JavaScript stuff. And actually, a lot of the work we've done ended up improving jQuery UI because we had to contribute back some stuff we did to jQuery to make those widgets accessible. So it's not just about Drupal, it's about the web. And I guess that's a common topic for Drupal 8. It's making the web better, not just Drupal. So I guess that's good that it's AA accessible and everything, because then you can just download Drupal 8. So it's not that true for Drupal 7 because there's been less involvement from the accessibility group into Drupal 7 when it was developed. So Drupal 8 has much better accessibility than Drupal 7, but it's not out, so nobody cares. So when Drupal 8 will be out, that will be true. So whatever you see when you download it is going to be accessible. And again, you need user testing, not just following the guidelines. So we have a couple of tools for Drupal 8. So we have some JavaScript like tools to help contrib modules and just developer write accessible code to make sure that keyboard users are not going to be tripped up by whatever you're doing. We have a module that kind of integrate with this API to show what's going on and to make it easier to develop accessible modules and code, basically. So who knows about Drupal 8 here? So who knows we have WYSIWYG in Drupal 8? Yeah, so WYSIWYG allows you to write HTML. It's HTML, so it should follow the WCAG guidelines. And soon, so we use CK Editor for our WYSIWYG in Drupal 8. And soon the CK Editor team is going to write a plugin to check the content you're writing for WCAG guidelines. So to make sure that whatever you're writing is following, the accessibility standards. Because, accessibility, it's over time. It's like font, you can just mess everything up with your WYSIWYG. Same with accessibility. And in the future, I don't know if you can read it, but there's a Quell JavaScript library that, I've been working on just as, contractor, I haven't developed it. That allows you to check web page for the WCAG guidelines and a bit more. So hopefully this will be integrated within Drupal to check for accessibility over time. We're not there yet, but soon. So sorry, we don't have really nice URLs for the Drupal documentation, but it's actually a very good documentation on how to go about writing code for Drupal that is accessible. I'm going to post a slide so you can just click on that and not having to copy that. But the documentation is really thorough into explaining what you need to do to make sure what you write is accessible. And there are lots of examples in the documentation on how to do things. I went way faster than I expected, so I'm basically at the end. Is accessibility clear for everyone, or do you want me to go back on something? Do you have questions? Anything?
I got a question.
Yeah.
You said that CK Editor was going to have a check for WCAG compliance in it.
Yeah.
For validator, I assume.
Yes.
So is that going to send content outside of your application to the web, or is it going to be internal?
No, because so in the background, the CK Editor will use the Quell.js framework that we are working on. And this is just, JavaScript framework, so there's no content going through any web service. I think that's what they do for the AGov distribution, right? They send the content somewhere and get the results back. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're the developers of AGov. And looking at their file library for the next version,
Mhm.
so the 2.x branch. We've started working on it, so we'll try and have a chat later on.
So, and you're not using CK editor, is that TinyMC or something?
Next version is CK editor.
Oh, right. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
The ARIA side of things, you said you weren't aware of the current support in browsers and clients to actually use it. I'm having trouble finding one of those as well.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can see, there's limited support for voice screen readers. Right, sorry. There's limited support by screen readers for ARIA, so we can use it, but we're not sure it's going to be actually useful for people, depending on what they use. Yeah, so that's why we need to test it. So what we use in Drupal 8 has been tested by over different screen readers, by different people, and by actually people who use that every day. So we're sure that what we have is going to be useful. But yeah, I don't know, because the specification is pretty big. There's a lot of things in it, but not everything can be used. Well, and expected to work. You can use it, but unfortunately. So what kind of things did you expect going into this session? Because I mean, I've talked about accessibility. That's actually my first non-JavaScript presentation, so I guess it shows.
I think you've covered more or less what I was after, but so is this stuff that's going into the Drupal 8 going to be backported to Drupal 7 because we're writing our stuff in Drupal 7?
Yeah, so, well, not by the core team. So I think the AGov team is doing accessibility work to make the distribution compatible. So it's probably them who know if you're going to backport that or not.
Yeah, so in AGov we do things like have ARIA roles, and we are looking at things that are being developed now, like the Quail.js library. So, I mean, as those things are being developed for Drupal 8, they typically will be spun off into contributed modules that we can then look at adding into AGov. But as in terms of Drupal 7 core, there won't be any additions to Drupal 7 core.
Yeah, it's only contributed modules. But I mean, if that's a requirement, we can start a discussion about that and make sure that if that's a important need for a lot of people, have something set up by the accessibility team, make sure we track the backports into Drupal 7. But I mean, we need to have people getting involved to do that. Yeah.
If you have a website which is not very accessible, is it a good enough strategy to provide multiple different types of that same content in different formats?
So I don't know actually, because I'm not an accessibility expert. So behind you have one. So yeah.
From a government perspective, I'm going to make this punchy and most of this has some interaction with the government. Having multiple formats, multiple means, multiple content, if they're all inaccessible, it still equals inaccessibility. Think of this from a news perspective. If you put up a PDF file, you put up a multimedia version of that content, you've got a Word version, but all of them are still inaccessible. They equal inaccessibility still. So multiple formats might be a way of minimising your exposure to accessibility barriers, but it doesn't resolve it. So give consideration that in the government there's two aspects to be aware of as well, and this is something else we need to be aware of in consideration too. The Disability Discrimination Act is all about providing accessibility to everyone, and it recommends that all agencies should achieve WCAG 2 level AA compliance. Most government agencies, particularly FMA prescribed or the old FMA prescribed agencies, have to, under the National Transition Strategy, they must meet WCAG 2 AA level compliance. To meet it, there's a requirement called accessibility support. So if we've got a format or if we're using some sort of programming or scripting, it needs to be supported by the browsers. Now, Jaws and MVA out there is pretty capable of taking in for most formats and browsers, etc. So in the desktop world, I'm only saying Adobe, and it's all contextual, possibly. So keep consideration now more than 50% of internet access is in the mobile environment and it's trending higher. Jaws and VBA are not there yet. Windows Eyes and those sort of products are not, do not have the support yet or recognise support. It's a contextual question, but in principle, don't rely on multiple formats and multiple versions to cater for.
Thanks. So short version, it's like responsive design, one content for everything that is accessible. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for developers who are attempting to make use of accessible development? What are some of the gotchas that you see in contrib modules that people should learn?
So, usually what, I mean, from my limited experience, because there's been other people working on accessibility in Drupal, so I wasn't the main contributor for that. But what I've been running into a lot is like the keyboard navigation. That's usually really messy because people just mess around with like the source order of elements, and it's unclear how to navigate with just the keyboard, making sure you use the right elements for links, for buttons, this kind of stuff. That's mainly what I've seen. I haven't developed the whole screen reader part of the functionalities, so I'm not sure how to go about that. Probably the next session we have answers for that, but I don't.
One thing I'd add is just make accessibility testing part of the development process.
Yeah.
So test your keyboard navigation as you're building it. So.
Yeah, and actually plan for that at the beginning, just like responsive design. It goes way easier if you think that through from the beginning. So just for information, who here has a website that needs to be accessible, like either by law or by their community, or right? Well, it depends. Well, not everyone has a government website. All right. Okay, so I guess I'm done. So if you have any questions.